All right, 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Have a good show.
I would like to call to order the August 2nd, 2021 Cabarrus County Board of Commissioners work session. Welcome, everyone. It's nice to have a little reduction in temperature today, both inside and out. First up is the approval of the work session agenda, and you all have a copy of that in front of you. So at this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the work session agenda, including the changes on page 6. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes. And we move to discussion items. First up is our monthly budget amendment report, and we're happy to have Rosh Kateri with us.
Good afternoon. Wanted to give you information on a new report we will be providing the Commission at its regular meeting each month. It's the monthly budget amendment report. The budget ordinance for fiscal year 22 requires the county manager to report any budget transfers to the Board of Commissioners at the next regular meeting. In complying with the budget ordinance, we will be providing a report of all the budget amendments made the prior month. The example report in the agenda shows amendments for the month of July. That report was run July 15th, so we will be providing an updated report of all the budget amendments for July at your regular meeting, August 16th. So just to recap, every month we'll be providing a budget amendment report along with our monthly financial report to the Board of Commission. And if you have any questions on any of the budget amendments, feel free to reach out to me at any time, and I'll be glad to answer any questions on this item.
Okay, any questions for Rosh? Must be self-explanatory. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. Okay, next up is proposed lease modification for communication tower off Warren Coleman Boulevard, and Kyle Billifer will talk with us about that one.
I'll be standing in for Mr. Marshall on this one, so give me a second because it just got thrown to me. But we do have, in fact, a property site lease at the vehicle maintenance building for the schools, so the bus garage, the back side of it. And it is for a private telecommunications tower. And representatives for that company that leased that property have contacted the county with a proposal to make a one-time payment for the remainder of that lease in lieu of the annual payments that the county receives. And kind of broke this down, and basically the initial lease is $27,000 per year. In each year it has a 2% escalator. And that goes for the first initial term, which is 10 years. The actual agreement allows for 3 5-year lease renewals, and those also accompany with those 2% escalators. So it could be taken all the way out to 2043, meaning that lease could go all the way out to 2043. The remaining initial term value is about $185,000 left in the first 10 year. It started in about April of 2018. And after each 5-year extension, that value can go up to, and I'm just going to throw out ballpark numbers for you. It's $355,000 for that first 5-year renewal. It's $545,000 for that second 5-year renewal. And it's $753,000 for that third 5th-year renewal. And they are offering a one-time payment of $368,000, and we're assuming that's for the entire 25 years. So if you look at that math, there's obviously money being left on the table. So Jonathan wanted to put it up in front of the board, just as a discussion topic. Obviously there is value of getting all of that payment up front versus these annual payments, which they actually come in monthly format. So there is an advantage to getting that all up front. But if you look at what we would leave on the table, that amount they're offering is what they would normally be paying if we kept it just the way it was and did not offer this one-time payment. That would represent the 2033 annual payment. So meaning there would be still 10 years after that where we wouldn't be getting that increase. So Jonathan had reached out to both Mr. Downs and Rodney and myself and just said, put it up in front of the board as a discussion topic. It is staff's opinion that we should probably go back to them and tell them that we would like to see what else they would offer. But again, wanted to put it up in front of the board for just a discussion topic.
I would go with you going back to them and see what else they might offer.
Yes, ma'am.
I agree. I think it definitely merits more discussion.
I agree as well. I do have one question. At the end of 2043, if we were to maintain the current lease agreement that we have, what happens at 2043 point?
They no longer are leasing that property. So that starts something off a different discussion at that
Okay.
point. Yeah.
Okay.
I would prefer to leave it either as it is or revisit it. I think that, like you said, there's a lot of money on the table there.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, next item, 3.3. I will turn over to the county manager for an introduction.
Okay, Alex, you want to come on up? Yeah, we're excited to have, and I know some of you or maybe all of you have visited Zipline, the drone operation that's out off of Kannapolis Highway. And so we have Alex here. They've got, they give us an update on what they're doing, but then also what new initiative we're gonna take on. It's pretty exciting. So we're excited to have the presentation on the business, but then also after you hear what they plan on doing, you as a board and we as a staff may start getting a lot of questions or concerns with things flying around. So we thought that this would be a good idea for the public to hear it as well, so they wouldn't have too many questions. But
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
great.
Yeah, and I think we have a presentation, and thanks, Mike. And as you mentioned, I'm going to go over sort of what does Zipline do as a whole, and then I'm very happy to answer specific questions around this facility we have in Kannapolis and where we are now and kind of where we're heading here very shortly. So let her. All right, so, and I said, I'm Alex Busker. To date, I have been working here. I'm actually from Charlotte, so very excited to get the Charlotte presence for Zipline started. I have been working with all of our healthcare partners, so both here in Charlotte that we'll be launching with, and then also as we look towards our other partners in Utah, Arkansas, and Michigan, are namely where we're heading next. Actually, I will be transferring to a global role when I come back from maternity leave. So, but the plan is to have that team out of this Kannapolis facility, which is really exciting. So instead of, they wanted presence on the East Coast, I was able to convince them that instead of going to DC, New York, anywhere like that, I'm going to build that office here at this facility. So I'm very proud and excited for that. And speaking of the facility, right now that is the temporary setup that we kind of have going. It's right off the Kannapolis Parkway next to Stuart Haas. So for those of you who have been there, you certainly have seen that out there. It houses where we will actually send off the aircraft for deliveries. It also houses our fulfillment center where we store and distribute any of the orders that our partners need us to fulfill. And in addition to my team, it'll also become the U.S. training facility for all of our U.S. flight operators and maintenance technicians moving forward. So like I mentioned, as we're heading to these other states and expanding our footprint in the U.S., everyone will come to this facility for their initial training before they'll go on to another location. Oh, you said you had the clicker. There it is. All right. So Zipline's mission is to provide every human on Earth with instant access to vital medical supplies. We get a ton of questions about this. Obviously, we started in Africa, as some of you may know. We'll go into that more here in just a second, but, you know, people, I think, often forget the pharmacy deserts and such that exist here in the United States. We like to think that everyone has access to everything they need, but that truly is not the case. My personal anecdote that, you know, is the reason why I'm so passionate about what I do is my mother actually has multiple sclerosis. She lives out at Baden Lake. And so for any of her treatments, she's driving an hour and a half into Charlotte. For any of her medications, you know, she's having to drive 20 plus minutes to get a specialty pharmaceutical because they don't deliver to her house, just next to Baden Lake. And you're like, oh, that's an hour outside of a major city, and yet she doesn't have access to that. And so that's a very specific example to me, but in reality, more than a third of Americans do not have access to vital medical supplies right now when they need them. And so it's very important in the U.S. as well as in our global operations. This is where I was going to show this video, but Lauren, if you don't mind. Yeah, I have another one that just on YouTube. It's only a minute. It just kind of shows you, for those of you who have not been to the facility, it'll show you an outline of the operations there in Kannapolis. So what is our command control center doing, a flight taking off, delivering, and then returning back. I think in this video is actually delivered to Huntersville Medical Center with Novant Health.
Controller, zipline 597 is ready for motor spin and launch. Spinning motors! Launching zipline 589er in 3, 2, 1.
It's about a 14-mile one-way, I think, delivery to Huntersville Medical Center, and it takes about 20 minutes. So that's someone just there on the ground. So I'll pause there. Any questions about that video? I know usually, yes, some will come up.
How many deliveries to different places can you make? How much fits on one of those deals, or is it always a one shot?
It is
delivery?
a one load per
Okay.
aircraft delivery system. That's what allows us to get a lot of the range. So when you think of your traditional quadcopter and other sort of drone companies that we've seen more of, their range is usually less than 3 miles or so. Doing this one-to-one payload in the aircraft that we've designed actually allows us to go a full 50 miles one way. And so the idea is that you increase your capacity for delivery per day and your operations and how many deliveries you can do by having multiple aircraft in the air and other measures.
Is there any easy explanation for how that thing just pulled it right in?
It is the easiest explanation is there are very, very smart engineers out in our facility in California, but the software, so when we talk about the system itself and what we're getting approved with the FAA, which is actually really interesting, it's not just the aircraft, it is the software that is autonomously guiding the aircraft. It's the electric battery system that is, serves as our GPS unit in addition to a data storage and uploading unit, and it's the recovery system. And so that recovery system actually has software in it in and of itself. And so the aircraft software and the recovery system software are actually talking to one another. And so they're able to time that millisecond sort of catch of the delivery. And additionally, if the aircraft is this isn't going to work this time around, maybe wind's making it shaky, the aircraft will actually continue on and circle back and then come back to that recovery system. So it's the way the whole system works together, and it's what we're being evaluated on with the FAA right now. Yeah. Okay, keep moving. All right, so as I mentioned, we started in Africa. So we started actually working with the Rwanda Ministry of Health, and the initial use case was flying blood to local clinics. So there's actually a blood shortage in Rwanda, and as you can see, Rwanda is about roughly the size of the state of Connecticut, so 2 of our distribution centers, we were able to cover initially all of the health facilities in that country, and they were able to centralize the blood inventory in that country in our Zipline distribution centers, and then we were able to send out both scheduled restock order deliveries of blood and plasma, but then more importantly, offer a service of an emergency drone delivery that didn't exist in that country then. So our predominant use case there was mothers in childbirth. So hemorrhaging, if they had complications, we were able to get blood out. And I think we're at over 600 lives saved right now in Rwanda, which is very inspiring. And then we moved on to Ghana in 2019, where actually that map of Ghana has 4 locations. We're launching 2 more this year in Ghana to cover more of that country. Japan, we're working on a powered by a zipline model, where we work with large companies that use, and they get the regulatory approval. That's going to be launching in Japan also. I think will probably be built at the end of this year, but launching the beginning of next year, and then launching in Nigeria this year as well.
I have to ask the question, what's the success rate as far as launching and recovering?
Yeah, I would say it's certainly improved over 5 years, right? The way we would measure, I would say, something not being successful is what we call a paraland. So in the event that anything is wrong with the aircraft, or if there's an emergency, we can actually send this command to the aircraft, and it's what's called a paraland. So there's actually a parachute that would come out of the side of the aircraft itself to allow it to gently come down. In the U.S., we actually have designated paraland areas. So in the event that we give that actual command, it's going to go to a certain like green space right here in this case, like here in the Cabarrus County area, we have green spaces that have been marked through with the FAA. Now, if something happens, then it like worst case scenario, like a software shortage, or like it's going to come in contact with an aircraft or something like that, it would then just immediately paraland, and that, like I said, it allows it to safely come down. So that's how that is the measurement that we would say, like, either it was a successful delivery or not. Last year we did a little over 64,000 deliveries and saw, I think it was 9 or 10 paralands. Yeah, there was question on if there was a tent that hit a bird. I think it was a whole thing in Africa. Yeah, but regardless, 10 out of 64,000. Yeah. All right, moving on. So like I said, Cabarrus County Distribution Center, that's where it's located. I think everyone knows where that is here. And so how we got started in North Carolina, kind of like the first in flight mantra, the Department of Transportation and the FAA actually worked on a pilot partnership here. It began last year, and we weren't really going to start until we went through our full commercial certifications with the FAA. However, when COVID happened, we were able to obtain an emergency waiver to fly PPE on behalf of Novant Health. So it was very helpful in that we've gotten a ton of testing and everything done, leading up to getting our full commercial operating certification with the FAA. And in that partnership, we flew, as it says here, a little over 5,000 miles. A little over 18,000 units of PPE were delivered, and as I mentioned, the routes, we were actually going to 2 locations in the Huntersville area, around 14 miles, 35 minutes round trip, and yeah, it was very successful, I think, and at least for us, like here in the U.S., to say like, okay, like we can approach an integrated airspace model, and we can show these health systems in the U.S. that there's a ton of value to be added here in both an emergency and like a scheduled sort of use case. So that lasted from last March. Oh, we built, but yeah, I guess technically we launched in May. But we stood up, actually we found out, oh, we're gonna be able to do this emergency waiver, and stood up this location in 2 weeks. And the Stewart Haas folks were awesome. Like, they're like, okay, we'll figure this out later. We're gonna let you use the land now, just get stood up, like let's start getting PPE out. So it was so many great partnerships as we were launching back in early 2020. And we flew that through the end of October when that pilot program ran out. And they were like, okay, we're no longer in the emergency sort of situation that we were in. And so now we're on the path to pursue like full commercial operating certificate with the FAA. Okay, so kind of what's coming. We're hoping to begin late this summer. I'm really hoping it's before the end of August. So right now we're working out with the FAA, so you can imagine. But essentially, we are pursuing a commercial operating certificate that is the equivalent of what there are two actually, what a Boeing gets for manufacturing its aircraft, and then you think like what an American Airlines gets for operating the aircraft. So we have to get both, since we do both. All of our aircraft is manufactured in California, and the recovery system, everything that I mentioned above. So it's, a lot of things to work through, but essentially we're doing several use cases with our partners here in North Carolina. We're going to be doing over-the-counter medical products to local pharmacies. So Canon Pharmacy in specific, like you guys know, that very local homegrown pharmacy, especially pharmaceutical products to customers' homes, kind of what the use case I was talking about with my mother. And just as a note, we do not fly opioids. So we don't have a controlled substance permit. We work as a third-party logistics provider under the state of North Carolina. And so we're not actually distributing the medication. We're just more acting as a logistics provider on behalf of our healthcare partners for that medication. But these are just a few of, these are the use cases. Like when we start with the FAA, certainly there'll be limitations to our practice at first. We'll have to show reliability, show safety measures, all of that good stuff. And then there's certainly places where we want to expand. There's, looking at, I would say the overarching thing is how do you get care closer to a patient, whether that's at the patient home or at a rural facility. So again, like thinking about cancer patients having to go all the way to Presbyterian for Novant cancer care. How can we equip rural facilities with what they need to provide that sort of care? And then we act as the distribution model to ensure that medication gets there. Right? But before I move to pursue very, I would say, integral and very urgent use cases such as that, we want to have just a little bit of more traction with the FAA. So this is a very, very small beginning to the things that we want to do. Okay. All right. So and this is just a few pointers about we call them zips. So, you'll hear us say aircraft or zip. It's continuously monitored. So we have pilots that are actually back at our ground control station. You kind of saw that in that video. They're monitoring everything from the airspace that we're flying in, the weather patterns in the area. We have both homegrown software we use, as well as we're using the same software that the ground control centers and other pilots are at Concord Regional and at Charlotte Douglas. Like we're on the same system that they're on. So it's being continuously monitored. And as I mentioned previously, like we can send controls to the zip. So we can say, hey, there's lots of helicopter activity in the area. Maybe there's a wreck on 85 and helicopters came in from news. We can actually tell the zip to avoid or come back. Like I said, in a very, very rare emergency, we can tell them to paraland. So it's being continuously monitored and we can send controls, but ultimately it is operating autonomously. If it's a nominal operation, we're not sending, we shouldn't have to send any controls in a nominal operation. I mentioned the 50-mile service radius, that's 50 miles one way. We cruise at about 60 knots. The payload, I mentioned it's a 1-to-1. Right now we're at just under 4 pounds for a payload, which is perfect for a lot of your healthcare use cases. A 2-hour flight time is our maximum flight time. And that is mainly a restriction with the FAA. So our electric batteries actually can go well beyond that. But with the FAA right now, and with the 50-mile service radius, 2 hours is perfectly suitable. I mentioned fully autonomous. 30 decibels while flying overhead. An Amazon truck is louder. When you have a zip that's flying overhead and you have an Amazon truck on your street, the Amazon truck is much louder. I think when at launch is probably when it zipped off that mechanism at launch, that's about the loudest that it gets, and it's been comparable to a vacuum cleaner. So really a lot of the questions we get from a community perspective is how intrusive is this going to be? Is it going to be loud? It doesn't hover. There's no landing needed for delivery. As you saw, it drops the delivery, the parachute and the box drop out of the belly of the aircraft. So you're seeing minimal community impact there compared to like what we're used to experiencing from drones.
So I asked this question to someone who's been out there, but I'll ask you for the
Yeah.
publics and to confirm that they were right. When it drops the delivery? How do you know the right person gets it and that they're there and they know it's coming?
Great question. Pharmaceutical chain of custody is a very valid concern and something that we've thought a lot about. There's sort of two things. So there's that one-to-one allows for a lot of control. So it's not like you're dropping multiple packages out of the belly of an aircraft and there's like a chance for something to get mixed up. The package that's being loaded into the aircraft has like a QR code on it, and it is what is telling the aircraft where it's going, no one else. So the package is directing. So when you have a package that's for a certain patient in this scenario, then the zip knows, okay, I'm only going where this package needs to go. And then finally, from an FAA perspective, I'll say this final mitigation is for an FAA safety concern as well as this chain of custody concern, is that we require that the patient be home at the time of delivery. So it's different though. It's not where we offer value to people who already have, like, let's say I can get my prescription anytime tomorrow, but it's a $10,000 drug. I'm waiting 4 to 5 hours whenever FedEx is delivering that drug. If they even hit that 4 to 5 hour window, they tell me. Even though we're asking the patient to be home, the patient is choosing the exact time. They're like, I want it at 3:15 on Thursday because I know that I'll be home then. It's convenient for me. And so at 3:15 on Thursday, as it's heading that way, 5 minutes before delivery, they're going to get a text message and it's going to say, your delivery area is safe and clear. Are you ready for delivery? We have to get a confirmation yes from them. And so that, a lot of patients' concerns are like, I don't want my $10,000 drug sitting on my porch when I'm not home. So this is a way to alleviate that worry and make sure that we're dropping in a safe area. Yes. All right, and I think that's it on sort of the overview. I touched on briefly where we are heading. So we have 3 partners right now coming out of our North Carolina facility. As I said, we're waiting on that final certification with the FAA, anticipated to come later this month. And then we will launch commercial operations with those 3 partners. 2 of the partners, we're doing the pharmaceutical home delivery to patient homes. We're starting very low volume, a handful of patients, and we'll be testing with those patients over the course of a month or 2 before adding on additional volume. And then the 3rd partner is looking to do delivery. I think I mentioned the Cannon Pharmacy location, so the one on South Cannon Boulevard. Yep. So that's where we'll be launching, and probably where we'll be. All that we will be doing for the remainder of this year. Like I said, as we work with the FAA, we're going to ramp up with the FAA fairly slowly, just because we're also asking them to then go turn around and certify some locations elsewhere. And we want to knock down some milestones before we start rapidly expanding. And we also want to see how it's going here in the community, right? We want to get feedback from our partners, feedback from the community, make sure everything's going well. So I wouldn't say on August 30th, you're not going to see, a zip in the air like every 10 minutes you look up. It's definitely going to be a slow ramp, and we're looking forward to feedback from the community.
As you can tell, this is an exciting company to have in Cabarrus County, and so one was for informational purposes, but the other one is as they started their new venture of home deliveries. I know that you, as well as us, and especially you guys, are going to start getting phone calls. Hey, what's that buzzing around my house? And so this is a good opportunity to introduce that, to let them know, and that way you guys would know as well. But I believe we were the first market that you're going to try that in
First
the
in
country?
the U.S.,
Yes,
first
so
built in
that's-
the U.S., first to launch and operate commercially in the
Yeah.
U.S., yes.
And that's pretty cool too. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as Alex said, their command center, it looks like a small air traffic control center out there. And these guys are trained pilots and engineers, right?
Yeah.
Most of the ones that are in there.
Yeah, I would say anyone operating in a flight operations capacity is a pilot, and they're going to be what's called Part 135 or commercially certified with the FAA. We also have maintenance technicians on site. So most of our pilots, they have a bachelor's degree, or they've gone to like flight school, obviously. On the maintenance side, there can be folks that are engineers with bachelor's degree, but then we also have like vocational sort of certificates in that program as well. And then we have, on the fulfillment side, my team is all pharmacy background. So there's a plethora of different types of jobs there. And then, as I mentioned, we'll be bringing in all of the training there. And then I'll be bringing in like global implementation and integration teams into that facility as well, which is pretty cool. But in terms of everyone getting questions, I'm sure it's going to happen. But one of the things we are doing is the week before, whenever we do find out exact day of commercial launch, that week before, we are going to be sending out mailers, just like little postcards to direct people to a Zipline website in all of the neighborhoods that will see a zip, right? So it's just going to be a direct mail campaign and saying, hey, we're coming to your neighborhood. One of your neighbors is going to be piloting this program with us. Here's a website for any or for additional information. It's going to be that flyzipline.com/North Carolina. And then, emails, all of that. We're hoping to help educate prior to and make that a little bit easier, but would love your feedback as we get launched on what you're hearing.
Could you touch just briefly on cost, how the economy works with this?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're working with private companies. In Africa, we work with governments directly. So the model in Africa is a little different in that your federal government runs your healthcare system. So in the U.S., it's something, and I say that to say, like, we're doing it differently in the U.S. in that we're partnering with private companies. So right now, a lot of it, the way our contracts are structured, are a pilot. We're doing a lot of testing, all of that, with basically here, as we increase scale, then we see a decrease in unit economics, like for them. So you'll see, it'll be like, here's our testing pilot phase, and there's kind of like a flat fee for that phase for a private partner. But then as we move forward and we see an increase in scale, as we get to 200, 300, 400 deliveries per day, then you start measuring out as a per unit economics price. So it'll be a price per delivery. In terms of health systems, I don't know how this may change in the future, but now when you get your drug delivered to your door, like from a Novant Health, for example, typically the patient doesn't pay for that. It's built into like the cost of the service and what's being billed to the insurance provider. And so where we want to get is that we're at an equal unit economic to what's already being used today. So that way we're just kind of a substitute into the process that already exists. Now we are also partnered with Walmart in Arkansas, and we'll be launching with them probably a month or so after we launch here in North Carolina. And so that looks a little bit different, right? Like when you're looking at a retail model, there probably is going to be a cost per delivery to the patient the same way that, if you order some, or it might be part of their Walmart prescription, the way Amazon Prime has a subscription. So I think I say TBD a little bit there. I think we'll see how it evolves, but our goal, like I said, is to be a substitute for delivery that exists today and be at the same price. But we need to increase daily capacity for that, which means working with the FAA.
We mentioned something about buzzing around your house, and it really doesn't.
Correct.
When I was out there visiting, and I was fascinated by the entire process, the drone, or it looks more like a plane, launched and then flew around, and of course we were standing out watching for it. It brought a package back and delivered it there. But I don't remember hearing anything, because we were having to watch really carefully to make sure we didn't miss it.
Yeah. I mean, it flies about, when it's flying to destination, it's going to be about 200 feet in the air, and it's quiet and it's electric on top of that. So you're not going to hear it as it's just flying in the air. It does descend to about 40 to 60 feet for delivery, and so you may notice it. But I think it would be, you are in your backyard, like your neighbor in the backyard, and you're like, oh, look at that, as you said, mini plane just kind of descended down and dropped a package. I think if you're in your house, you're not even going to hear it. You're not even going to recognize it.
So, and how do you determine where you can deliver? I'm thinking about my house, and I'm thinking about trees and power lines and so forth. Does it need to be how do you check it? You check it out with aerial photographs in advance, or?
Great question. So we have an entire team called our Site Bring Up Team, full of GIS or Geography Information Systems engineers. And so we work with them. So I will work with them if I'm like, okay, I have a new patient that wants to opt in for zip line delivery. Right now, we work with the GIS team. I'll give them a list of addresses maybe, and they do that analysis with both proprietary software that we have and software that exists. So like LiDAR software, for example, that basically what it'll give us is a picture of elevated items off of the ground. So that allows us to say, okay, here's power lines, here are trees surrounding the property, right? And so where the technology is today, we do need a certain clearance area that's both approved or a necessity from the FAA and also just to make sure we're delivering safely and accurately. I would say it's about, a 6 to 8 meter radius, depending on the height that we're dropping, right? So if you have really, really tall trees around your property, I'm gonna ask for a larger radius because I gotta drop a little bit higher, and vice versa. So there is an analysis to be done for that. We are in the process of building software to do that less manually and more automatically. But we also are working on new generations of aircraft that will dial in that accuracy as well. So I think we're gonna approach the but we're gonna increase efficiency from 2 angles there. And hopefully a year from now, we'll be able to say that delivery area needed is much smaller.
All right.
Yeah. But there is a whole evaluation, there's an entire evaluation that goes through, and each route and delivery area is approved by the FAA right now. So we'll move away from that a little bit too as we look to scale. It'll be, here is a region that's approved. You've shown a serviceability analysis of maybe Cabarrus County and all the addresses that you would deliver to, and we've okayed any sort of delivery you want to do here. That'll allow us to move to more instant on-demand sort of use cases. But for now, at least in the beginning, just making sure we're operating safely. And again, proving out these use cases with the FAA, we'll evaluate each address individually and get it approved.
Right. And so Novant has a distribution center there in close proximity.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's why you located there, and Novant was sort of your pilot program.
Initially, yes. I think yes is the short answer. There was a lot of learning to be done. We thought maybe that this location would only serve Novant and that we would work closely with their logistics center. I think the latter is true. We still will work very closely with their logistics center, and it is very convenient that we're close to it. But I think we've learned we don't necessarily have to be right at the logistics center to make these use cases work.
Right.
So for example, weirdly enough, the initial use case we're beginning with Novant is specialty pharmacy delivery to the patient. That doesn't come out of that logistics center. It comes out of a specialty pharmacy down at university area. So I think initially we were like, oh, this is how we think it's gonna work. And in cases where we can be right next to the product being distributed, we always will, but it's not a necessity. We can certainly provide value and come up with ways to increase efficiencies for these health systems without being right next door.
Right.
Not really far away, but not right next door.
Well, that sort of ruins my next question, which was going to be, you're located immediately next door to Prime Beverage.
Yeah.
So you can't deliver a pack of energy drinks to us.
Yeah.
Which energy drinks are becoming a big part of our industrial
Yeah.
development here in Cabarrus County
I
right
know
now.
it is interesting. I mean, we certainly could deliver a pack of energy drink. As long as
Right.
it's less than that 4 pounds, then we're good to go.
Great.
I'm almost scared to ask this or know what the answer to the question is, but you talk about FAA approval and routes and whatever. How long does that approval take?
We've been on the journey a little over a year. And there's certainly milestones leading up to it. So I wouldn't say we started at 0 and 1 is, the end of this month. There certainly have been wins leading up to it. I think certainly what's added to timeline in our case is, like I said, we're getting both of those certifications. We're on the manufacturing side and we're on the operating side. I think also we would have been ready a lot sooner. I mean, it's easy for me to say that, but I think that it's very true. This is very new for the FAA. I think it's evident that the fact that we're getting what American Airlines gets, and we're clearly not an American Airlines. We're getting what a Boeing gets, and we're not building aircraft that even has a pilot on board, right? So when you come to, there's just been a lot of, I would say roadblocks. So when we're trying to prove, okay, we're following this operations manual and this certification per spec, And they're like, okay, well, one of the lines in this, and, we'll get to a point where we're like, but one of the lines is this, is that the pilot makes X and Y decision at this point. We're like, we don't have a pilot on the aircraft. So we've had to like work with the FAA on so many nuances at that level, because we're being required to sort of, we're fitting this new mold into the traditional operating certifications. So there's certainly been some times where we'll just spend 2 months on like one item, just like figuring out what is this going to look like in the terms of, drone delivery, commercial drone delivery, that is. And so it's been great though, because we've really been a partner with the FAA. It has taken longer than we would have wanted. That much is true. There's just no denying that. But we are truly like one of the leading partners with the FAA, figuring out like, what is this going to look like? What does integrated airspace with autonomous aircraft look like? And that's a big thing. And so to say that, we will get to a place where, albeit limited, we're operating commercially in a little less than 2 years, I think overall that's an accomplishment.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions for Alex? Well, it is fascinating operation to watch. I think it was pre-COVID when I was there, so you've been out, how long have you been out there?
So I started July of 2020. So I
Uh-huh.
came in a little after we had just launched the COVID operations.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I think we're very fortunate to have such an innovative industry coming to Cabarrus County, the first in the nation. And so we are proud to have you here, and if we can be of assistance in any way, please don't hesitate to let us know. And
Yeah.
I think this will just be one more of those reasons that people will talk about Cabarrus County.
I agree. Yeah. And like I said, as a Tar Heel born and raised, I will say I'm very excited this is in Cabarrus County. Yeah.
And I will also mention, for anybody that's interested, if you do a search online, there are lots of really cool videos and examples out there, in addition to the ones that we've seen today, that I think I certainly enjoyed watching them.
Yeah, absolutely. There's examples of what has been done in Kannapolis, but I think even more interestingly, like if you look at what's being done in Africa, you can see the vision and like where all of this is heading. And it's very inspiring. So thanks for calling that out.
Great.
Yep.
You're welcome. Well, we
Great.
appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us today.
Thanks for having me. All right.
Absolutely.
Yep. Have a good one.
Okay, we move now to item 3.4, Courthouse Expansion Project Update, and Kyle Billifer will have that for us.
Good evening. Just wanted to provide a verbal update of the project and then show some pictures. So I'll go through some of the milestones that have already been completed and then the upcoming milestones, and then I'll have Lauren scroll through the pictures and kind of point some of those out so they kind of pop out to everybody. So recently completed on the project across the street, the slab on metal deck pours for level 3. They started the basement and exterior framing, started the basement mechanical room rough in, completed fireproofing in the basement and framed areas on the first and second floor exteriors. And they completed the insulation and glass install on the mock-up, and I'll explain that a little bit more. Upcoming milestones are completing the slab on the metal deck pours on level 4, install framing on the first floor interior, complete the first floor exterior framing and then move to the second floor, start the MEP overhead, the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing overhead in the basement, and continue with the installation in the mechanical room. They'll complete the mock-up and set up a review of the final product and install the remainder of the steel. There's 6 sequences remaining, and most of that is due to not just the steel shortage, but more so the fabrication of the steel after it comes from being a shortage. So it's a process. You don't just get it the way you order. It has to go somewhere and be milled. So it's kind of the combination of both those processes. And Lauren, if you'll scroll to those pictures, I'll kind of explain it. So you're looking at the basement right there, so you can see all those pipe hangers. That's why they have to get in all the mechanical and plumbing. So as we start to put the exterior envelope in place of the building, we start to be able to bring in our mechanical and actually start to run it. Because as you get to the interior of the building, meaning hanging drywall and painting, everything is obviously operating mechanical-wise. So that's obviously why they start in the basement and why that looks like the farthest along. So you can see that's pretty much very close to what our mechanical is going to look, or mechanical room is going to look like, minus all of the equipment that you'll have to traverse to get through it. If you could scroll on, Lauren. Some highlights in this. So you were sitting at pretty much the intersection of Church and Means right now, or what was Means, and you are looking down what was Means Avenue, what will be the public plaza. You can kind of see sneaking out on your left, you can see the historic courthouse if you look through the first floor. You'll notice on the vertical steel, the fireproofing has already been installed. That's what looks like that gray popcorn that's on there. And you can see what is the blue is where you start to put all your waterproofing and your ceiling in. So that's essentially what our elevator lobby and our public lobby is gonna look like on the right-hand side of that picture. If you could scroll on, Lauren. Okay, that gives you an idea on the other side of what was Means Avenue. So that's sitting at the public plaza, and your historic courthouse would be on your right-hand side, and you would be looking into what is going to be the actual entryway or public plaza. So somewhere in that space will be a large piece of public art at some point. That was for you. And so that gives you an idea of where they all are in that process. And when they continue to talk about the mock-up board, so the mock-up is a large wall. It almost looks like if you've ever been to a climbing gym, that's kind of what it looks like. It's a big facade that's built, and it has all of the exterior materials on it. At this point, it has all except about like 4. And as we mock that up, the design team goes through it first, because obviously this was their vision of the colors, and that's what we presented to you and how it all comes together and flows. So not just the type of paneling you would use, but how it meets and butts together and how that looks. So once they approve it, then we would schedule time for county staff and the Board of Commissioners to go over there and look at that. So that's a big milestone from them, and most of it is in place. I think we're waiting on 2 glass samples and trying to figure out how to handle some insulation behind some of our panels. So that's kind of what's stalling that. You can scroll on, Lauren. This was a picture I grabbed this. This is actually not from Messer Construction. We have a third-party construction imaging group that goes through, and I wanted to point out that this is the 3rd floor. This is, you were looking out on, that's Corbin right there. So that's the wraparound, the public wraparound, and those black cords, if that's what they kind of look like, they're actually tubes. That is your radiant floor heating. And that's just interesting because not a lot of buildings have it, but due to the amount of glass we have on the building and how difficult it is to heat that, that's what you have. You have that radiant flooring where the public would be sitting. So that's as they're waiting to go into courtrooms. Does anybody have any questions on the project? Okay. It is, yes, and you should be. It is-
Extremely exciting. And so you gave a good example of some of the steel with the fireproofing on it.
Yes,
So
sir.
that's what Commissioner Shue and I were talking about as we came in. You're going to cover over our beautiful signatures on that topping off beam, right?
It'll be there forever. That's why I wasn't in a rush to sign it, because I knew it was going to get covered over.
Preserving it.
Yes.
Preserving
Yeah.
it with the
Yeah.
fireproofing,
Yeah.
exactly.
Fireproof off. It'll be
Yeah.
in there just like you signed it.
You'll have to
Yeah.
chip a lot of building away to get to it first, but yes, it will be there forever. But yes, that's what we're putting up. You're seeing a lot of that, and we are desperately trying to get through our last pours of concrete. So, it's a little bit misleading, but as you put that metal decking, which looks like the floor, especially if you're in this building, you look over and you're like, oh, there's a floor done. There's concrete that goes on top of that, and those are very early morning pours because of the traffic of the trucks, and they're very challenged based on weather. So we're very much trying to get that done because that'll make life a lot easier on our construction crew across the street.
Okay, any other questions on the courthouse?
Just, Kyle, I know you talked about this early in the morning, and we hear that, so we work it out with the city of Concord and with the neighbors and let them know that it's happening, but that's
Yes.
20 or 30 trucks,
Yes,
20 or 30
could be in
trucks
excess of that,
around
yes.
4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning.
That's correct. And those all have to go through noise permits with the city.
Great. I think you have the next item, Emergency Equipment Warehouse and Technology Services Project Update.
Yes, if you could scroll to the first one. Yeah. This is just, actually, yep, right there. That is a site plan and gives you an idea. Again, this is the Emergency Equipment Warehouse and the ITS building. So it is one building. And you can see if you look at the right-hand side of that print, the more squarish part of the building, that is a actual ITS department. And then to the left of that is the Emergency Equipment Warehouse, which will facilitate emergency management, EMS, and the Sheriff's Department. There will also be a bay in there for ITS to work on the emergency vehicles, as that's what we found was the synergy and the driving force behind moving ITS out of the current building that we're sitting in right now to that area was not just the synergy with all that equipment, but the overlap with fleet maintenance, which is right across the street in the new operations center. Obviously, we are in the early stages of this. We are in the final stages of the due diligence with a property acquisition of 2 residential parcels that allow us to put that larger parking lot there in the front of the property. I'm kind of just giving you reference points. And obviously, that alleviates our buffers. We are currently in the process, we are working with the Corps of Engineers that we just submitted today to look at some of our wetland delineation, actually to make judgment calls on if there is any wetlands there. So it depends, is it wet all the time? Is it only wet sometimes? So we're working with the Corps of Engineers on that. And we've already completed all of our geotech over there. And we think if we get some good information and good news from the Corps of Engineers, it'll alleviate some of the retaining walls that we'll have to have around some of our stormwater best management practices, basically sand filters. We're going to have a significant number of them. We already have 1 across the street, and we'll have 2, if not 3, on this site. So that's kind of an overall layout of it, and we'll, Lauren, if you'll scroll to the next one. This kind of gives you more of a floor plan, and obviously the Emergency Equipment Warehouse, I could have given you more of a floor plan, but there is not much of one. It is pull in, pull out. Besides the electrical that is put in place in that building, there's not much to it in terms of what you would normally see from me. The ITS department is obviously a lot more involved. There we have different areas where there's raised flooring. There's a significant amount of card readers and cameras, and obviously there's a lot of different types of space for usage. So you can kind of see it there. You've got some closed offices. You have a lot of collaboration rooms, and we've worked very close with Todd and his staff. They've been available for us at the drop of the hat. But I would say we have an excess of 5 to 6 areas that are where different customers and ITS folks could come together, or just where internal ITS teams could meet. So a lot of collaboration space versus this is your office, here's your 2 guest chairs, and here's your desk. So a lot of that, and that proves challenging acoustically. So we kind of have had to lay it out several times, and we have one more division of that space that we really need to hammer out. But the rest of the spaces have come along very nicely. And if you could go to the 3rd slide, Lauren. That gives you an idea. That is a potential rendering. We have to run some of this by the city. Mr. Shanley's staff and myself sat down with 3 different renditions of what the exterior could look like, and down to the minute details of where does the sunshade go and what color is it, and is it halfway up the window or 3/4 of the way up the window. And we had to pick and choose probably 15 different attributes of each of them and come up with this to combine it and try to break up the building the best way possible versus just a large brick monolithic looking. And obviously we wanted to give it that presence at the corner when you drive in, that crown. And if you kind of look at the operations center, we don't really have that. Obviously we purchased that building the way that it was. You do know where the entrance is because it jets out, it's pronounced. We wanted to make sure that we gave this building that same type of this is where you come, this is where your entrance is, versus just a box. So this is kind of what we came up with. It allows us to get a lot of natural sunlight in there, which to my knowledge, I don't think the ITS department has ever had. Not in my 15 years. So we are getting a lot of natural light in there for them. So we've all kind of looked at that and agreed on it, and now we're working with the city. If you can look at the back portion, so the lower left-hand corner, you can see where the warehouse is not bricked. There's actually vehicles that are in the way of showing the vehicle coming up to about your hip. The brick that will come up to your hip. A lot of that has to do with zoning. So we are working with the city to work through that, if that will stay metal or if that will be bricked all the way up. If you had asked me a year ago, I would have told you that we would spend more money if it was bricked all the way up. This month, I'm not sure what I would tell you. It's kind of 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other. So from that aspect, we're working with them. Also, a lot of it has to do with Ramden Court, which is the road that intersects the two portions of the parcel. That is a private road, so the county owns that road. And that has a lot of impact on what the buildings have to look like. So we will keep you posted as we move through that process. Any
Kyle, I
questions?
just have
Yes,
a
sir.
question. Do you need to go ahead?
No.
If you're standing on Cabarrus Avenue and you're looking, Operations Center's on the left,
Yes, sir.
and this building will be on the right.
Yes, sir.
And I'm assuming that the warehouse part is behind it.
Yes,
Is
sir.
that correct? It's not parallel with the road,
Parallel with Cabarrus or parallel with Ramden?
parallel with Cabarrus?
No, no.
Okay, so it's right directly behind it.
That building
going
hides
back?
it.
Okay.
That building hides it.
Okay.
Now, once you go down Ramden, all bets are off. You will see it.
Oh, it'll be on your right,
That is correct.
and the warehouse is in the back of
Yep.
this building. Okay.
Which was another reason for that elevation. That it kind of gives it, to assist with the reforming of the gateway, that portion of Concord coming in.
I just wanted to be properly acclimated.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And just as an update, we're in the final stages of DD design. So those prints came to me today, and once I review all 62, I will send them to the customer to make sure they look at them.
Looks very, very attractive, and you addressed the question I had, which I was going to ask if ITS folks were going to have any special acclimation to come out from underground up into the light.
We have, yeah, we have purchased a bulk order of sunblock, SPF 100. So,
Special glasses and
yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
We're a little concerned that they might not be able to work in that environment, so there is some concern about that. They've been in the dark for so long down there. But no, they've been great to work with. Obviously, ITS is a different type of customer because they sit in on most of our design meetings with our other buildings. So this is odd when usually I'm at the same table with Mr. Shanley and his staff, and we're trying to figure out how to do things, and now it's their own space, and I think we're all like, oh, wait a minute, now we need to make decisions for us. So it's kind of, it's been a learning experience for us how to go through that, but it's been great. The only other thing I would offer to the Board of Commissioners is that the brick selection, which has been a significant discussion among the design team. Obviously, again, with the Operations Center right across the street, we did not purchase that. I mean, we did not build that. If we had, probably going to use a different brick on that. So we've looked at different mills, we've gone to different areas in the city, and we'll end up with a brick mock-up for county staff to look at and make a decision. It won't be far off of what is at the Operations Center, but it will not be exact. We will try to tie something probably a little bit more, I'm not really sure that I would say aesthetically pleasing, but I'd say a little bit more modern brick, a little bit color.
Okay, any other questions on that item? And then Kyle's has the next one. We have a lot of building going on. This one's on Frank Lisk Park Barn Rebuild Project Update.
Yes, the last meeting that I presented, I showed you kind of all of our final DD reviews and the site plan. We've worked closely with the Active Living and Parks, and in fact, there's still some questions that we hammer out via email on, things such as minute of where to move the volleyball court to, and do we really want a knee-high wall here? So we are still working out those little things, but in terms of where it's going, how it's going to be fed by utilities, and the major parts of it and how it's going to look, that has all been flushed out. So once that's flushed out, and this is very much the practice, and most of you have been here throughout the process of the courthouse. So as I go through a schematic design process and as I go through a DD or a design development, and then obviously a construction development, I try to bring price updates to you. Now, again, these are what estimators, third-party estimators, this is what they estimate based on what we're designing and what we're sending over. So this is not off construction drawings, this is off design drawings, which don't always show all the exact details. So the estimate that I got back actually about 30 minutes before this meeting was at $5.3 million. And that is for the barn, the silo, and all the site work connected to that. So obviously, we have some trimming and cutting to do and some things to look at. Again, we are budgeting some of the things that are in there as alternates. So the silo would be an alternate, and I feel confident that that's in the $250,000 area. There are also other funds that we have accessible. Obviously, there's a lot of site work and a lot of utility work, and the county already has a CIP that's just under $800,000 for that type of work. In fact, we would have, if the barn had not burnt down, we would have replaced the water line that's feeding the barn anyways. Unfortunately, I wouldn't have made it as big as it needs to be, but it would have been replaced. So the county plans on utilizing those funds as we always did, and that was in one of the meetings that I presented to you all about that we had those funds out there. So I still do not think that we are in the at the need of crisis or coming in front of the board and asking for anything to be in terms of a budget amendment from contingency or the actual commissioner's contingency. I think we have the funds in that project, and I think that we need to kind of twist the screws a little bit and get a little bit closer. Keep in mind, over the past 4 weeks, as this was being hammered out and budgeted, you know what is happening with your lumber costs right now. And that's unfortunate for us specifically when you're building a barn. Everything that I'm hearing from the other contractors and all the market reports that we do get is that they foresee those lumber prices going down. But they're not telling me when. They said it could be up into 6 months away. Again, we still have a lot of design to do, so right now, this is just a discussion topic. I'm letting you know what that number is, and when I come back up with the Franklin project update, I'll probably have some more information and what my plan is after discussing with the county manager.
Very good. Questions on that item? All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Okay, next item, 3.7, our innovation report from Debbie Brannon.
Good afternoon. I feel like we've already had our innovation report with the zip line. That's very exciting. Tonight, we're going to start off, as always, with our book club. This month, we're reading Little Bets by Peter Sims. This book aims to show the best dreamers and innovators may think big, but they start small. In the book, it talks about how Chris Rock goes to a small Comedy Zone and tries out all his new jokes before he goes on, HBO Live or the big stage. So he goes and tries out and is willing to fail a little bit to find the best jokes. So this book kind of aligns with the kickoff we had of our year-long training initiative, Fail Forward program that we're participating in. You guys may remember that Josh Soren from the Center for Public Impact came and talked to us about that program. The Fail Forward program's a year-long initiative that includes a cohort of 5 other counties and 15 different departments. The other counties that are participating this year are Lane County, Oregon, Ramsey County, Minnesota, Loudoun County, Virginia, and Teton County, Wyoming. So we have 3 teams, the tax department, the planning department, and DHS have teams that are participating with these other counties. There's also a quarterly masterclass for executives, and I sent an invitation to you, the Board of Commissioners, to participate with that as well if you would like to join us. So the county strategic priorities. I put some cards at everybody's desk. There's 5 cards here. We've talked about these every month in the innovation report. And as you know, we adopted the county strategic plan in December of 2019, right before the pandemic hit. So unfortunately, we lost focus on the strategic plan. So tonight we're going to talk about getting our focus back on the strategic plan. And where we wanted to start was with our employee awareness, with change management. Awareness of the change is key, so we thought we would find out where we're succeeding or failing on the county strategic plan with our employees. So we're started out with a survey we sent out and asked the employees to complete this through the month of July. We had about 371 responses, and about 45% of the employees didn't even know we had adopted a new strategic plan. So awareness is probably the best place for us to start there. And a little less than a third saw a high value in the use of strategic plan in their area of county operations. Yet 70% of the respondents believe that their daily work contributes to achieving the goals and objectives of our strategic plan. And a majority do not believe they have the skills to create and measure the goals and objectives that support the strategic plan. 75% of the respondents did say that they have access to tools and resources to use the strategic plan. But less than 20% strongly believe their daily activities and tasks and projects relate back to the county's strategic plan. Oops, sorry. 41% are interested in learning more about the strategic plan and performance measures. So in response to the survey, we've developed awareness materials like those business cards that I've given you, that each one has the strategic plan on the front and the goals on the back. And I encourage you, as we're going through the work session today, you know, when somebody's speaking, you know, which one of these strategic plan initiatives does that relate to? You know, the zip line certainly is a healthy and safe community. The culture and recreation with the barn. So as we're going through these items, you know, just kind of remind yourself, what are we working towards? Which one of these strategic priorities are we addressing? And we're also hosting a Cabco U next week on August 10th for employees to attend, that we will be going over the strategic plan and performance measurements and just talking about the strategic plan and using that as some training and awareness with our employees. Now Ellie Landrum will introduce you to a few other new resources that we have access to via a cloud platform called OpenGov. And she is remote.
To share a little bit about OpenGov. Uh-oh, some feedback there. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm really excited to introduce OpenGov to you. It's a budget and performance measurement reporting software. I'll only be talking about the performance and reporting piece tonight because the budget side is still in the very beginning stages of our implementation. So with the reporting aspect of OpenGov, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and give you a look at what the software looks like internally. So we have been able to upload performance data and create what we call saved views, and it will show a variety of different measurements in this format. You can drill down into the data and see the actuals that we've uploaded in the data reporting. These saved views can be uploaded to dashboards and what we call stories. These stories are useful for public transparency, whereas the dashboards can be sort of seen more internally. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of what those look like. So we have created a sample story for the county strategic plan. Formatting, colors, all of that is a work in progress. We just wanted to show you what it would look like to the public if we put the 5 priorities on a public-facing dashboard with our goals and objectives and the corresponding performance measures. So this is an example. These performance measures are actually pulled from the budget's program summaries for the last 3 years. Some of the data is incomplete, which is also why this is a work in progress. But we just wanted to give you an example of how we could potentially share our performance with the public in an open transparency portal. So if you were to click on one of these tiles, you would be redirected to the data within OpenGov, and then the public or any user could drill down into the data and see more detail on what that particular measure means, what the numbers are. You could even look at different views if you wanted to see it in a line graph format versus a bar graph. So we're really excited about that. So from a department standpoint, Karen and her team at DHS have been collecting a ton of data, mandated and not mandated through the state. And they wanted to see what it would look like in a more organized, interactive view for their board and also for internal reporting purposes. So we created this story here with a lot of their mandated performance measures. Again, work in progress, not completely or not fully completed, but we are excited to be able to provide this to departments. And so if any other department wanted to create stories or dashboards for internal reporting or grant reporting, this would be an option for them. So again, if you click on one of these tiles, it would take you back to the data in OpenGov, or you could drill down and get more information. So I've mentioned the dashboard format, and the dashboard format is a little bit more internally focused. So if a department or the county as a whole wanted to use maybe not necessarily a more public-facing story, but a dashboard to report their progress on a monthly, quarterly, or annually basis, then this dashboard would be a really good tool for those departments to use. So this is the view of each performance measure in a dashboard, and you can scroll down and see all the different measures that we've uploaded for DHS. And so I will ask the board if there are any reports that you already receive monthly or any data you would like to receive in the future. We are more than happy to create those dashboards in OpenGov and present those to you on a monthly basis. So you just let us know if you like this format and we can provide it for you.
I'll just say the spreadsheet that Ellie took from DHS to create these different little graphs here, it's huge. And just to look at that spreadsheet and try to interpret it yeah, okay. I mean, that is, having that visual is so much more helpful to be able to look at a glance to see, you know, are you meeting your targets than looking at that spreadsheet and all of those numbers. So that's one of the things that we're trying to achieve here. And just looking at our performance measures as well. I know we've struggled with performance measures for years, as long as I've been here from a budgeting standpoint. But I think when we start looking at what we're measuring in this format, it's going to help us improve those measures.
Agreed.
Thank you, Ellie. And that concludes our innovation report for this evening. Is there any other questions?
Great. Thank you very much. Any questions for Debbie or Ellie?
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we move now to discussion items for action. First up is item 4.1, modernization of the discharge of firearms and air guns ordinance. And I think Commissioner Strang is going to lead us on that, and then Sheriff Shaw will also be participating in that discussion.
Thank you. Just a brief summary, and I'm not going to read the whole brief summary for everybody, but when we came in last month, we discussed, we had some cleanup work to do, essentially. We had some statutes in there that had been repealed. We also had a strange level to measure at, and we took out that potential clear, that issue that was causing the muddy translation of what do we do with this ordinance. So we've cleaned that up, and then since we've gone there, we've had a lot of feedback from the community, as well as I've spoken with Grassroots North Carolina on firearms education, the NRA as well. Sheriff Shaw and I have worked pretty diligently on this and looked at modernizing this and moving it into modern times. The old ordinance, dated back to 1967. Sure, in 1967, everybody had probably that amount of distance, the 500 yards. So with this, we've covered a lot of new regulations, new statutes, and also took distance into account, where if you looked at, I think you and I figured out that 500 yards, you would need how much land, how many acres of land? It was substantial. And the way the old statute, or the old ordinance also read, there wasn't a straight line measure. It discussed, it made a circumference pretty much from the shooter. So with it, or I shouldn't say shooter, from the residence or building. So it made a 500 yard circumference around that, which made it very, very difficult for anybody to legally shoot in the county. It pretty much eliminated it. So we went back to the drawing board and are proposing under this new ordinance. I have a couple revisions. Sheriff Shaw and I have spoken briefly ahead of time. Under the exceptions clause, it's number 3, letter E, subsection I. We are going to remove that, and the reason being that refers to the NRA backstops. And the intention there for the removal is that the NRA backstops, the NRA regulations are so very stringent and costly to a potential landowner, homeowner. If they wanted to do an NRA one, more power to them, but we're not going to require them to do that. So we thought we would clean it up by just noting that a backstop, whether it's a land, a natural land barrier, or if they've built a substantial berm that, would safely allow them to shoot within that 500 feet range. In addition, we had also discussed moving the distance from yards to feet, with the exception of an airsoft gun. We wanted to leave that at 100 feet because airsoft guns don't generally go that far. So we don't want to lose our teenagers that have airsoft guns, the ability to shoot. The overall arching purpose that we decided to look into this a lot harder and really draw some hard line distinctions and clean it up and make it very, very clear is safety. Cabarrus County is growing by leaps and bounds, and we can't take people's firearms, what they're allowed to do, their constitutional rights, away from them, and we can't restrict them in a manner that the old ordinance did under our current population. And we continue to grow in leaps and bounds, and I'm grateful for that, but we also had to keep safety in mind. I looked at several similarly situated counties within the state of North Carolina and at their ordinances based on their population and density and mass and everything. And the distance range varied dramatically in some areas. In some areas, it wasn't so bad. But when Sheriff Shaw and I met, we determined that 500, we felt comfortable with the 500 feet, and that would suffice, and that would cover all of the intended meanings, intended restrictions or exceptions that we wanted to implement in here. We also looked at the future a little bit. We looked into, we may potentially have a new training facility out on Stonewall Jackson's property out there, and we wanted to make sure that we planned for the future so that anybody that lives in that neighboring area wouldn't have any questions when we started to do that. So we've made it extremely clear to any gun owner or resident what somebody can and cannot do, and I think it's going to alleviate a lot of headaches for the deputies as well as the citizens in Cabarrus County, because I know numerous times deputies have gone out there and there's been no resolve because the old ordinance wasn't very clear, and so nobody left satisfied, and nobody, the Sheriff Shaw and his deputies could not enforce anything even if they wanted to. So this ordinance brings us into the 21st century, so to speak, and away from 1967, and really clarify some things for a lot of people that had a lot of questions. I am sure some of you had phone calls, emails. Sheriff Shaw and I have had our fair share of, if not more so, meetings with people and discussions with people about this. And they're very pleased to see that we're getting into the modern 21st century era of this. And I'll heed the rest of my time over to you, Sheriff.
Thank you, Commissioner. As you all know, I came to you last month simply to revise a method of measurement within the firearms ordinance that existed here in Cabarrus County since 1967. By doing that, and you did that, and I'm appreciative of it, it obviously brought awareness to a number of people that probably weren't that familiar with our current firearms ordinance and the distance that was involved in that. The older ordinance also did not spell out the exceptions, some of which are based on state law, that you can't pass an ordinance that regulates hunting. That's in state law. So it was, I think, a level of awareness was raised. People reached out. I know to all of us, listened. I'm having meetings up until 2 hours before this meeting to hear everyone's side. And I think what has been put together spells out those exceptions clearly. It takes into account the population of Cabarrus County is not what it now was, not what it was in 1967. I think it allows for the safe discharge of firearms, which is this ordinance is truly about, is about safety and protecting our citizens. We also have very responsible gun owners in our county that do an exceptional job. Since I've taken office, I know of no accidental discharge or damage to real property that was the result of discharging a firearm on individuals' property for the purpose of practicing and staying proficient. And in talking to a number of people, that was their concern. They want to stay proficient with their firearm. They want to have the ability to teach their children the proper use and safety of a firearm, as many of us enjoyed growing up. Many were concerned about the distance in long-standing family properties where they had been able to do this. And because of the distance that was in that older ordinance, when you think about 1,500 feet, we're talking over a quarter of a mile. So you can get into some substantial distances. If you have one or two homes that are close by, it starts to really get into substantial distances. And as Commissioner Strang said, we looked at a number of county ordinances across North Carolina. I personally looked at ones in other similar counties like Forsyth, for example. Their distance is 450 feet. So looking at areas that are populated similar to us, if not larger, what they're doing, what they have in place. Very similar exemptions, very similar requirements, and spelling it out in an effort to make it clear, to make it everyone be reassured that this was in no way an attempt to suppress gun ownership rights. It was to provide for safety in the discharge of firearms, and also for folks to feel comfortable if they don't participate in the discharge of firearms, that it's done in a reasonable manner with a reasonable distance or buffer zone from their particular property. So it even spells out shooting across someone else's property, those types of things, and again, addressing safety from a general backstop standpoint, which most people in Cabarrus County do. I would like to reiterate Commissioner Strang's comment about a public access in the future as we talk about building a range, a new range. I think there would be great benefit as we grow as a county and become more popular, that we have that option for the citizens to be able to go out and safely fire their weapons at a range that's built to a certain standard or level. I think that's something that's worth looking into and gathering community comment as we move through with that project in the future. Potentially putting together a committee of Cabarrus County citizens on all sides of the issue that could help give us guidance and come to a good pleasing resolution on that as to where it is and how it's constructed and those types of things. So I appreciate the commissioners willing to help out. We were in a difficult situation in that we had an ordinance that was pretty tough to enforce. And it left us sometimes with officers dealing with two angry people now, one that couldn't get resolution to their complaint and one that didn't understand the ordinance that governed their activity. And then we had unintentional impact on, because of the way the ordinance read. So this will dramatically help clear that up. Straight line distance measurement from the point of shooting to the structure. It's simple, it's predictable, and I think as always, we will continue in the enforcement of this ordinance and every ordinance that our goal is to warn first, to educate second, and only have to charge someone with a violation of an ordinance when we have no other choice. So I think that's what ordinances truly are, is to educate folks about the standards we have in Cabarrus County and what we want to uphold for safety purposes.
I'll also just add to that, we worked very diligently with this. I've talked to several citizens here in Cabarrus County that are actually happy that we've taken a good stance and taken a hard look at this and tried to clean up, what we had currently on the books. So I think, there's a few little minor revisions, like I mentioned. We'll take out the NRA backstop provision because that is very, very tedious and costly revisions to someone's property to put that kind of backstop in. I would propose to do the 100-foot air gun, take that out of the 500 because that's essentially what children will use. And then I meant to mention, Sheriff Shaw, in the occupied building, we might need to spell out the exemption of the homeowner's home. Yes. 500 feet of that, and we excluded that out of there, right? Just noticed that tonight as I was sitting here. So we will need a public hearing on this. It is obviously out in the public, so they are aware of it. And I think that's the right thing to do to keep them informed as to what changes are coming the way, and hopefully everybody will be pleased.
Okay, questions or comments, commissioners?
Just a couple. So the 500, what we did last time didn't change anything about the ordinance on the 500 yards. That's what it was before, correct?
That is correct. The
Okay.
only change that was made was the method of measurement.
Right. So there was a lot of anger, again, about us trying to take people's Second Amendment rights. And I know you were kind of the Second Amendment rights girl. So when you brought it to the table, I felt like that you were speaking on behalf of those people, which is what I told many when they called. You need to call Commissioner Strang. She took the lead. And then I know a couple said, well, we were deferring. We were throwing it off on somebody else. But that is the truth. I want to get this on the record. You were the person to do it. And then it was also put out there that I denied a public hearing on this event. Well, we were all copied on that email. I want to make it perfectly clear, I could not do that even if I wanted to, which I didn't. I am one of 5 votes. So, please get your facts straight before you start putting things out that aren't true.
Yep.
So, it's a hot button issue, obviously, and immediately, people just jump and assume the worst. And most of the people I talked to, after we talked, they were very, understanding. There were still some that were, but, the goal was not to do anything but to help you guys in my opinion, to help you guys be able to enforce and do your job and without being caught where nobody was happy when you left or nobody really understood what was supposed to happen. So I just want to make that clear.
Right, and you are right. There's a couple people that had questioned me why there was no public hearing, and we hadn't really changed anything other than just cleaned up some language. So we had discussed that, and we really didn't need to have a public hearing for that. And I think, if anything, it's kind of the sheriff and I have talked about this a few times. It's been very amazing to see how many people did not realize that there was already an ordinance in effect. And I think that's why it turned into such a lot of people read about it and were like, wait a second, we didn't even know this existed, or they thought that was the existing ordinance. And as many people as I spoke with, I said, no, in 1967, all we did was clean up some repealed statutory language and clean it up a little bit. And here we are today with the rest of what we want, what we had intended to do on the onset, which that takes some time.
Okay.
one question, just for clarification for those watching as well. A house of worship, educational facility, or a park facility, are we talking about property lines of those facilities, or like the barn? Would you be measuring from the barn, or would you be measuring from the property line of a park, because we have walking trails around the perimeter of the park?
I mean, my suggestion, knowing like Frank Lisk with the walking trails, I think we may need some language that says from the boundary of the park. Generally, what we are talking about from a residential standpoint is a straight line measurement from the structure to the point where the firearm is being discharged. But certainly with the parks and being as large as they are in Cabarrus County, I think the park boundary is the safest probably approach to that.
Okay. Schools as well, with the athletic fields and.
I would say so, yes. Not, because sometimes that athletic field is a substantial distance from the school building itself and could be occupied as well.
Just to clarify this, and I'm not trying to point out an error, I just want to make sure I'm following, but the summary sheet at the beginning says yards, but we're not in yards, we're in feet. 500 feet. Okay.
That's the proposal, right?
Yes.
That's the yards on the summary sheet, that's under the current law. Sorry, that describes what the current law is, the 500 yards on the summary, the first brief summary page.
Commissioner, you did catch an error in that summary.
And that's fine. And I'm not trying to point out an error, I just want to make sure that I'm following along, because I heard 500 yards, feet, and something was 1,500. And I don't see that number in here at all, so I was trying to figure that one
No,
out too.
I see what you're saying. In paragraph 3, that should be 500 feet, and that is
Okay.
reflected in the text of the ordinance.
Okay, that's what I thought. All
see it now.
right. Well, I guess, when you came before, it sounded to me like we were trying to make your job better. We were not trying to make any more restrictive on gun rights. We were trying to make sure that nobody was unfairly targeted. And again, it is a hot button issue, and we heard a lot from people, and I think we probably will get a fair amount of citizens at the public hearing, which certainly is fine, and everybody has the right to come tell us exactly what they think about what we're doing. I'm in the same spot I was before. I deferred basically to the sheriff, and this is 100% your purview, the safety of our community. And so if this is better than what we had before, then I'm fine with what we're doing, and I'm going to trust. And I appreciate the effort from Commissioner Strang to kind of help guide us or provide feedback on getting, a 67 ordinance up to 2021.
And if I could, we've tried to, with David's help, our previous ordinance, really and truly, by the previous ordinance, a 21 gun salute at a military funeral was not allowed, which is purely ceremonial. But now we address it. That there's little things in there that you just didn't think of, but as we reviewed other ordinances, we went, oh, okay, what about a ceremony where you want to do a 21 gun salute, or you want to fire a cannon, or those types of things. So it allows for those exemptions, and many counties have done that. Ours was just so old. In 1967, it just wasn't something that was really thought to be in that, and where we live today in this day and time in Cabarrus County, where we've got drones flying around the sky everywhere. So it's just a different time, and we've tried to do it. We've heard the folks, we've met with them, certainly understand their concerns, and want to certainly fairly do this to where it's reasonable, enforceable, and most importantly, looks out for the safety of the citizens of Cabarrus County.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman, and for the sheriff. It's sort of unexpected just to come up, but you probably got the video. We got the video from the lady with the shooting in her backyard. We've seen that. How does this gun ordinance, how does it correlate with the noise ordinance in the rural areas? I mean, I mean, all of us got a video, and it had that clearly in the background. This is the way it was every Saturday and every Sunday behind her house, she said, even though they might have been legal with their distance and all of that, but they still had the noise to contend with. So how can you correlate these two together?
Well, they are two separate ordinances. You know, there's an inherent noise with the discharge of a firearm. The noise ordinance is in place in order to bring about, you know, peace and quiet at certain times of day. You know, we work on that as a judgment call, just like we do with everything else. Whether it's sound amplification that we deal with, you know, general noise ordinance requests, we come and seek compliance and education. So the two work together. You can be perfectly legal in what you're doing, but unreasonable when it's related against the noise ordinance. And we try to work with folks to see what that neighbor's reasonableness is. Sometimes it's, well, if they'll finish up about 6 o'clock, I'm fine with it. Or if they finish up by 9 p.m., I'm fine with it. And we try to work within those areas of, you know, getting both parties happy if we can do that. But if not, then we tell the individual that the activity has to cease. So it's kind of it's two ordinances that you have to work through individually. And, you know, as far as, I will say this, as far as, you know, discharge of firearms complaints, we are not stricken with them by any measure. When we do have them, they, in the past, have tended to be very contentious because there's been very little resolution of it based on that ordinance. Noise ordinances are similar. Normally, they're one visit and it's taken care of. And I encourage folks to call the sheriff's office out in the county and let us know if something of that nature is going on. Then we'll work with folks to come to the best compromise and resolution that we can.
Thank you, Sheriff. I just wanted for the people that view this, because they always sort of relate the two together. And, I mean, I have it at my house all the time, and so it doesn't bother me, but there are those, though, that it does bother. And it's hard to make everybody happy all the time. But coming from you, they'll hopefully understand that there is a significance of the two
Yes.
ordinances there, and they each serve a different purpose, but they do work together.
Yes, they do.
Guess I will echo what we've heard from several other commissioners. I would be in favor of whatever the sheriff and his office recommends, and that's what we did before. But obviously, there is an educational issue here that we need to address. And if we had a public hearing tomorrow, or if we have it 2 weeks from now, and the public doesn't understand what we're proposing any better than the last one, they're not going to know what to talk about at the public hearing, because the emails that I've received, now you mentioned the one email with the video, she was thanking us for improving her situation. Well, we didn't improve her situation, because at that point, all the distances remained the same that they've been since 1967. So obviously, she thought we were helping with something that we weren't. Now we've changed the distance from 1,500 feet to 500 feet. So I can't imagine that would be pleasing to her. The other emails that I've gotten is, with this new law, which, as you've very clearly mentioned several times, is not a new law. It's a 1967 law that we have totally eliminated hunting in Cabarrus County, which you also stated that was incorrect. And so I guess I'm trying to think in my mind, how can we better convey the correct information to folks, so if there's something that they don't like, they'll know what it is, rather than perceptions that are out there that are totally inaccurate. And I just throw that out as an open discussion. I'm not sure how we can get that information out. Unfortunately, I don't think there are throngs of people watching this program right now, or this meeting, but do you have thoughts on that, Sheriff?
What I can tell you, Mr. Chairman, is that when I was contacted by a number of hunters, their concern was that as the ordinance existed, that it virtually eliminated hunting in Cabarrus County, which is simply not true. So I reached out to the supervising officer for the North Carolina Wildlife Enforcement and provided him with the North Carolina General Statute that covers counties not being able to pass an ordinance that infringes on the taking of birds and animals in hunting. It specifically addresses what they do in lawful hunting. He assured me he was going to share that with the many classes that he teaches, contacts that he has, as well as all his wildlife officers that work in Cabarrus County. That's an education piece. I mean, to be quite honest, he told me he wasn't aware of that state statute. And so there was even a little bit of education on the side of wildlife for me to, to share that with them. Because he was under the assumption that it applied, that it counteracted state law as it relates to hunting. And we all know that you can't do that. There's only one referendum that can be had as it relates to hunting, and that's if you're allowed Sunday hunting. You can do a referendum in your county by the vote of everyone, whether to keep it or not keep it. So it's very, very protected. Other folks that I talked with, and I reached back out to everyone that contacted me, was in regard to their land and the distances and those concerns. And I think 500 feet, to speak to that individual that didn't know that an ordinance existed, it does provide that buffer of having those individuals close to your home, the reduction of that noise near the home. And so that's, that's, I think, is a good compromise versus, over a quarter of a mile, compromise. But when we're looking at landowners' rights, one individual's rights ends where another's begin. And sometimes that's what we're called upon to do, is clarify where it begins and where it ends. So I do think in looking at this and in talking with folks, that it's a reasonable distance that still provides for safety. So, I know that's a long, drawn-out answer to your question about how do we make the public aware. I think it's through reaching out to individuals. I know one individual I talked with today, he had talked with over 300 people. So we had a very good conversation, talked about the revisions, talked about some other things that were of concern. And I asked that individual to reach back out to those, folks and let them know. And he went away from our meeting feeling very comfortable. So I think, we have to look at that and continue to educate people and let them know.
Well, and I think just by us having this conversation, that certainly helps. And of course, we love for people to come out to public hearing. I sometimes complain that we don't have enough people that do come and express themselves. But I just want to make sure they have the correct information, because in essence, what we are doing is putting forth an ordinance that is far, far, far less restrictive than what we previously had in place. So it's something that most of those people should be rejoicing about if they really understood that it was giving them a lot more flexibility and a lot more freedom. I just hope we can get that message across so that people understand, for very good reasons that I think you've both enumerated, based on the change in the landscape, the change in the population, a lot of different things that have occurred during that time. So certainly appreciate the time and that you have put into it, and hopefully our conversation here will help to educate some folks. On the question of a public hearing, we certainly, we can call for a public hearing on anything we choose. But we have a public hearing at every one of our regular meetings where we have a period where any citizen, and I frequently tell people, they say, well, what are the restrictions? I said, there are no restrictions. We have a time limit just so we don't spend the night here. But, you know, people, there are people that have come during public comment section and read the newspaper for 3 minutes. So they're at liberty to express themselves in any way. So, and we encourage that and appreciate it. But is there anything else that you can think of that might be misconstrued that we need to talk about to make people feel better educated about what this includes?
Well, I think, you know, there's always unintended consequences, which what we thought was going to be what I thought was going to be a simple fix of a straight line measurement to help me better enforce an ordinance that had been around a long time, obviously created a level of awareness of a very old ordinance. And people begin to look at the distance that was involved and do their own research and call into question that distance. And like I said, those things that are exempt because they weren't in there. And as that may be, certainly concerns over gun ownership, gun rights, being able to practice, be proficient, because we do want gun owners. I want gun owners. I want good gun owners, responsible gun owners, which the vast majority in Cabarrus County are. And I understand the need to stay proficient. I also understand the lack of range availability in Cabarrus County. It's virtually non-existent with the exception of one indoor range. And so there is a need for this. Obviously, hunting is near and dear to my heart. I have my license in my pocket. They're current and up to date, and I'm a hunter. So I don't want to do anything to infringe upon that. Those were appearances, I think, at a first glance at that old ordinance was, wait a minute, this is going to do away with that. And that was not the intention. I know of myself and I know of y'all. You were very helpful in saying, what can we do to help you, Sheriff? Because we had dealt with multiple disputes since I've been in office, multiple disputes of having people at the office, people irate in my lobby, not understanding why we couldn't address it or why we hadn't addressed it at that point. And so I came seeking some relief. We obviously, I think, brought about much discussion, heated debate, and which is a good thing. And I think, I know I've personally learned from it, but I think the best of intentions were in place the entire time, and not any intention to suppress gun rights whatsoever. And certainly that ability to teach your child to shoot and to be able to do what you enjoy. So I appreciate y'all working with me and working through this together. And I think as we talk about this and in the coming meeting, I'm really confident that those individuals will feel like their voices were heard and that we reached what I consider to be a very reasonable approach for 2021 as it relates to a gun ordinance instead of 1967.
Well, hopefully, if we set a public hearing for our regular meeting, that that might generate some interest. And if you are willing to be available to speak to this ordinance prior to that public hearing, I feel like those people that have questions or concerns, if they hear the things that you have said tonight, probably most of their concerns will be addressed. So I hope you'll be able to participate with us on that.
I absolutely will be there, and I will be more than happy to speak at the meeting.
Great, excellent. Thank you. Any other questions on this item?
Just
Commissioner.
not a question, just a final comment. I was just sitting here thinking about, if Cabarrus County continues to grow at the rate it's been growing in the past 8 or 10 years, and you think about this ordinance was wrote in 53 years ago, we won't even be able to go out in the backyard, I don't think, much less shoot a gun, so if it keeps going like it's going. But you have to change with times, and I appreciate the effort of Commissioner Strang and Sheriff yourself and whoever else had a part in it to make it better for the citizens.
So this is right now on our agenda for the 19th under new business, but it doesn't say public hearing. So what's our intention there? Or is it not the time to discuss that?
Well, I think it is, because when we get ready to approve our agenda, we'll need to specify if we want this to be a public hearing that, which Lauren has to advertise that on our webpage and so forth. That would be a decision that would be up to the pleasure of the board.
And I'll add to that, that's the reason I was thinking if we did a public hearing, it would have to be advertised, so that could help with the education of folks that have not, they're not aware of it, not aware that there's changing, and clarify some things for them.
Is everybody agreeable to going that route? Well, then we will, when we approve our agenda at the end of this meeting, we will amend it to add that public hearing. And that, as you said, perhaps will get a little more education, notification out there for folks. Thank you very much. We appreciate you being with us. Okay, we move now to item 4.2, which is funding reappropriations, and we'll have Rosh back with us for that one.
Every year, we bring to you an action item to reappropriate funds from the prior fiscal year. These funds were budgeted in fiscal year 21, but the use of the funds were not completed due to. Sorry. Did you all hear that initial part, or do you want me to redo it?
You might start from the top for our
Okay.
television audience.
All right. So every year, we bring to you an item to reappropriate funds from the prior fiscal year. These funds were budgeted in fiscal year 21, but the use of the funds was not completed in fiscal year 21 for a variety of reasons. Reappropriation of these funds will be required to complete the purchases as planned. A list of the reappropriations are provided in your agenda package. Also provided is a budget amendment to budget these funds. We will be appropriating fund balance for the majority of these funds, and then for the remaining amounts, we'll be budgeting revenue for the reimbursement grants. So some of them have reimbursement grants, and we'll be budgeting revenue instead of fund balance. The total reappropriation request is $1,542,407. I'll be glad to answer any questions you have about this item.
Yeah, so some of the, excuse me, just to elaborate a little bit on that, some, the requests are for programs that were started and didn't get finished by year end. Some of them didn't actually get started because of COVID-related issues. It's not an opportunity for staff to say that they would like to reappropriate funds for something that wasn't already noted in the budget. So, so this list was vetted by several different people at different levels, and this is what we came back with. So again, as Raj said, some are grants that didn't get finished, and we need to finish spending or funding those grants. Some are for equipment and for various reasons that they weren't able to purchase during that time just because of circumstances that were out of the department head's control. So they're all there for you with the reasons why or the justifications. But again, just wanted to let you know that it has been vetted at different levels
prior to coming to you, so.
Okay, any other questions on this item? All right, thank you, sir. Okay, next, we have Fiscal Recovery Fund Spending Plan, and we're happy to have Rodney Harris with us for that one.
So this item is to give you a preview of what to expect at your next meeting. And so we are going to work at a staff level to get you a recommended spending plan for the American Rescue Plan funding that we received. And we would share that with you at your next regular meeting, and then give you some time to digest that, to hopefully go ahead and approve that in September. You'll remember previously, we thought we had to submit this by the end of August. We've got some clarification, and we no longer need to submit a spending plan to the Treasury. So we have a little bit additional time. The spending plan that you will see will have sort of two components. One is the recovery grant process that we kicked off about a month ago. And this is for profit entities and also nonprofit entities to go ahead and submit proposals by this Friday at 5 p.m. We had an information session for that with over 60 in attendance. So there is a lot of interest in that. And to date, we've received proposals of in excess of $1 million for that. And then in the second bucket is sort of staff-led or county initiatives. And so for that bucket, we have things like park investments, stormwater, utility upgrades, some Health Alliance, obviously, expenditures, and those are north of $20 million of identified requests. So we have about $42 million total that we can allocate over the next 3 years. Any questions?
So just to be clear, when this goes on the consent agenda for the next time, it's just approving for you to submit the plan by August 31st? I mean, what are we?
So I think
Because I heard you say
I'll have to
September.
work with Lauren on the
Okay.
language for this. It might go on as new business.
Okay.
Because we'll be sharing the actual spending plan recommendation.
Yeah.
And then we won't be asking for any action
Okay.
at the regular meeting.
So
We'll
that
hold
would
that
come
until
over here,
September.
okay.
Correct.
So when you say you're gonna have that for our regular meeting in 2 weeks?
In 2 weeks.
Okay.
That is the goal.
Great. Okay, other questions? Somewhat unrelated, but while we've got you here, I know that the rental assistance program that we've talked about, the eviction moratorium that ended, I happened to be listening to a radio story yesterday, I think, where they were telling horror stories of people that had not been able to access assistance that was supposed to be out there and so forth. And of course, these were all in other parts of the country. But I was just curious, while we've got you here, how we're doing in that regard.
So Mike and I actually met with Karen and Laura Leip, who's managing the program, earlier today, and we continue to struggle. It's been a difficult program to administer, primarily because of staffing challenges. Just when they get folks on board, they lose them, and it has created quite a backlog that they are trying to work through. So we had three new temporary staff that were starting today. They were in orientation this morning, and we are also going to stand up a partnership with CCM to have them help us administer these funds. As you said, this is a nationwide issue. It's been in the media quite a bit lately. $45 billion was allocated for emergency rental assistance, and to date, only about 12% of that has gone out the door. And so this is a problem that municipalities, counties across the country are having an issue. It's difficult to get the documentation from the clients, those that are in need, because we have to meet the federal requirements for the documentation. It's oftentimes difficult to get the landlords to submit the vendor information we need to make the payment. So it has been a challenging program. It is one that Mike and I are keeping on top of to try to get things moving a little bit quicker.
Do you have any information or insight as to why a landlord would be hesitant to participate in this? Because it's to help them recover, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So why would they be hesitant? What don't I know?
We have not been able to answer that. It's just been difficult to get some to respond.
Ronnie, what's the number so far out the door?
Officially out the door is a little less than $1 million, but we have about $1 million plus that has been actually approved by Human Services. So that, as you recall, we got a direct allocation of $6.5 million. We have about another $8 million that we can get from the state, so we're about $15 million that is available. And to date, we've got about $1 million out the door.
I guess the message that I would want to get out to the public is if there's anybody hearing this that is in a situation or is aware of somebody that's in a situation, please pick up the phone and call me, call you, call the general number for the county, call Human Services, and please make us aware of it, because there may be things that we can do to help. There may not, you know, and certainly I am not familiar with the federal regulations, but I would hate to think that there's somebody out there that just is not aware that help is available. So there again, information, informing the public is an important part of it. Thank you for that update. Okay, any other questions? All right, we'll move now to item 4.4, Family Caregiver Support Program Grant, and we're happy to have Anthony Hodges with us.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for allowing me to come and speak with you today about our Family Caregiver Support Program grant. Just some brief information, background information on the Family Caregiver Support Program that we do. Most of the programs that we do in Adult and Aging Services focuses on either our elderly or disabled adults in the county. This is a little bit different, where it focuses on those caregivers that care for those individuals. As many of you are probably aware or know, that caregiving, especially in a 24-hour, if you're a 24-hour family caregiver, very strenuous, very stressful situation. So what this program does is to help those individuals through a variety of resources, care management, some respite care, some supplies, those kind of things to help. There's some training that we do a couple times a year for caregivers to help them help deal with this and help care for their loved ones, to keep them at home as long as they possibly can. To help do this, we receive a Family Caregiver Support Program grant. It comes through the Division of Aging and Adult Services, through federal funds, and then through our Area Agency on Aging. When we did our FY22 budget for this year, we didn't have the final totals from the state at that point, so we used historical data in doing our budget. We did just recently receive the final numbers, and it's a little higher than we budgeted, a little bit over $38,000 for this grant, and it ends up being $51,387. So it's a little bit more than what we budgeted. There is no county match on that money. It's all straight money, and like I said, most of that goes toward salary support for our family caregiver specialists, but it does help pay for respite care, short-term respite care for our caregivers, along with some incontinence supplies and some nutritional supplements and some training. And I just ask that you approve the budget amendment for that.
Okay. Any questions for Anthony? All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, we move to item 4.5 from Transportation. And we're happy to have Bob Bushy with us to talk about the 5310 grant.
Thank you, Commissioners. This is the FTA 5310 grant that I came before you last month. We moved it to wait until we got an exact number from our award and to create the appropriate budget amendment. We did get that final number, and the total grant will now be $234,480. This includes 2 vehicles and transportation trips for the elderly handicapped of Cabarrus County, including the Cabarrus Vocational Workshop. The total match for that will be $82,385. There is no public hearing required on this. So we come before you to ask to accept the grant, either at the total amount of the grant or any amount less than that at your discretion.
guess the obvious question would be, do we have the matching funds budgeted to cover the match on this?
There was no matching funds budgeted because the grant was not released until after the budget was completed this year.
Therefore, it would need to come from your board contingency, if you so chose.
Mhm. And this is not a new program. This is or give us a little history on the 5310. I remember discussing it in previous years.
Correct. This is a program that comes through the city of Concord, a federal grant that they administer and do a call for projects. We have been participating in it since 2016. So it's several years old for us. The call for the projects was later than normal.
Okay, so in previous years, we have budgeted the match.
Correct.
Right. Commissioners, any thoughts or questions on that? Okay. And so I think this.
There's not a placeholder, we didn't put a placeholder, I mean, I understand if we didn't know the number, but, so currently it's 0.
Currently it's 0.
Okay, and then you said it would come from board contingency, which, how much is, what would we be taking out of how much of
Right.
what
Rodney,
type of
you got
number?
the latest number on that, or Rush?
So I don't have the exact number. It's normally around 350,000 that we put in there for board contingency. In this case, I would actually recommend, because our sales tax numbers continue to come in really well, I think we could go ahead and just appropriate fund balance to cover this match.
Therefore, that would keep your contingency intact.
Intact, yeah.
So.
Is everybody good with that? It's.
I'm good with that for the return on it.
Well, for the, yeah, I started to say that's pretty big return and pretty important service as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we move to item 4.6 from EMS, 4 ambulance remount purchases, and I think Jimmy Lentz is bringing that, and I believe he is virtual today.
Yes, sir, Chairman, and thank you for this opportunity to come before you. I'm actually going to turn it over to our fleet manager, Captain Jonathan Malden, for this presentation on the remounting of the 4 units that was budgeted in FY22. So, Captain Malden.
Thank you, Chief. Commissioners, this evening we're coming to you as we have in years past, seeking approval for our purchase order. This year is a little unique. We're actually remounting all 4 of the vehicles that we're requesting. So this year we're remounting 4 existing ambulances to the cost of $89,999 each, for a total of $359,996. These 4 units have exceeded our fleet's acceptable mileage as EMS response units and have outlived their reliability. We are following the Cabarrus County Fleet Vehicle Replacement Policy with that. This year we have put out for bid and gotten bids from Demers proper, and as well as a local remounting agency. And this year we will be going with Emergency Transport Associates for the remount of our 4 units. So this evening we do come to you for approval for that purchase order of $359,996. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to field those this time.
And just to elaborate slightly on that, some of the reasons for choosing a secondary, more local remount option for this is during the current times we live with the pandemic, we have found it quite challenging to just the logistical part of getting trucks to Demers and Beloit, Canada, and getting them back. Our 2 trucks that we were remounting in FY21 are currently still up there, truthfully at no fault of Demers, but just like everything else during the pandemic, it has been delayed. ETA, Emergency Transportation Associates, is the salesman we're very familiar with. He has, ETA will honor and respect the exact same warranty as Demers, so we're not losing anything there. The prices were very competitive with a cost savings of avoiding the transport fees to and from Demers and Beloit. And anyway, that's what played into us selecting the ETA as an option. It is by no means indicator that we are not still totally satisfied with the Demers product. And when the time comes that we are looking at new purchases again, we will certainly be looking at the Demers product in the future. But we feel this remount option is very doable for us logistically, and the ease of having it somewhat local is going to be much easier.
Jimmy or Jonathan, can you, for the sake of Commissioner Strang, who hasn't gone through this process of remounts, and then also the public, what does remount mean versus buying a new vehicle?
Certainly, I'll let Captain Marlin take that.
Thank you. So essentially, over the years, the wear and tear on the vehicle itself, the chassis, the cab of the vehicle, it takes a beating. It takes, all the impact from the road, the mileage, just like your personal vehicle would. However, these Demers products are built to such a high standard that they recommend that they can be remounted. So what that would entail would be taking the actual box, what you would designate as the ambulance, off of the chassis, rolling the old chassis out from underneath that box and putting that on a brand new chassis. So a vehicle with 0 miles on it. They actually do strip all the paint off of the box. They'll take off interiors such as the floor. They'll reupholster the seating inside the back of the ambulance. They'll make any necessary repairs if there are any cabinetry, or if there is any cabinetry that needs a lock replaced or the Lexan glass replaced. All of that will take place as well. And they will evaluate and obviously look for any damage to the vehicle structurally, and then the vehicle be repainted and restriped to match just as it left, and it'll come back looking like a brand new vehicle. So we're still meeting the safety standards that Chief Lentz described. We're still meeting all of those. Everything will operate just as normal. It'll essentially be a brand new truck. So it just a much larger cost savings to the county and to the public.
So the remounts versus purchasing an ambulance outright, what's the savings?
A new unit, then we'll just base it on our purchase last year, our FY21, was in the range of $161,000. That changes about 5% annually, so I'm sure it would be a little bit higher than that now. So we're basically in the $75,000 to $80,000 per unit savings to be able to remount. This was a selling point. I know some of the commissioners that have been around for a while. This was a selling point of us going with Demers and making a transition from a previous manufacturer in the 15, 16, 14, 15 range to the Demers product was the option to remount, which would be a cost savings in the future. And we've got our fleet to the 100% Demers mark, which was the safety standard we were after. And now we're in a position where we can do remounts, which will result in a little bit of a cost savings or be more efficient.
Sorry, I want to make sure they get the information out. So the size of your fleet now demands that we replace 4 every year in our budgets. Is that right?
That is correct. The last probably 3 or 4 years, we have been at a point of doing 4 a year. That is somewhat to keep up with the call load, to keep up with the mileages within the fleet policy established by Fleet Services and county IAM, which oversees fleet service. And as we grow, that will change. But right now, this year, we are still able to do it comfortably with a 4 per year and be effective with providing the service to the citizens.
Okay, any other questions, commissioners? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move now to item 4.7, which I think we may have already touched on, but Rodney will talk about that one.
So Wendy has nominated me as the spokesperson for this item. The American Rescue Plan funds that we talked about earlier come with significant reporting requirements. And so this is asking you to authorize a full-time temporary position to be our administrator for these funds. That would mean they would be responsible for the quarterly reporting, the annual reporting, and then all of the reporting that will be required of any subawardees of these funds. And so this position, if created, would be funded 100% through these federal dollars, and it would go through December 31st of 2024. So it would be about a 3-year position.
Seems like a no-brainer to me.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you, and I think.
Good job.
Hey, I was ready.
Yes, Wendy has the next item, update of capital project fund.
So this is just an update to our county capital project fund, and this has the attached budget amendment and budget project ordinance. So there's 3 items on here. One is to increase the engineering for the courthouse for $40,000 from contingency for a change order. The second item budgets the sale of 242 General Services Drive, and the funds will be appropriated to use for a Frank List Park stormwater project. And the third item is budgeting the debt proceeds, the amount we're planning to borrow for the emergency equipment warehouse and ITS relocation. So that's the 3 items that's covered. Is there any questions?
Questions for Wendy? Okay, well then I think you have the next item as well.
Yep. This is the write-off of the ambulance receivable. This is, our finance comes before the board each year. We keep 3 years of ambulance receivables plus the current year receivables in the general ledger. So this year, we're writing off fiscal year 2017, and that'll be a total of $2.2 million. And just to give you a point of reference, last year for fiscal year 2016, it was $2,021,000. We will still continue collection. I mean, we'll still be able to collect on these, but this allows the finance department to adjust the accounts receivable balance to accurately reflect the balance that we consider collectible.
Questions on this one? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next is item 4.10, Cabarrus County Emergency Medical Services Headquarters, and Kyle will be back with us on that one.
Good evening. The GMP 1.5, which is a steel package for the EMS headquarters, located on the Cabarrus Avenue and Union Cemetery intersection, that was received on July 23rd, 2021 at 3 p.m. in this building in Conference Room B. The GMP will be added to the current contract the county has with the construction manager at risk, which is Vinoy McFarland Joint Venture, as a contract extension to the existing contract, which until this point has only included pre-construction services and GMP 1, which was the early site package. And if you recall, I was just up here with that GMP recently. So this is the steel package for that, and that total has come in at $1,030,584. So we need to move forward in the regular meeting of approving that, and then it'll be an AIA contract extension that'll go through our normal contract process. In terms of the actual steel package, we had 4 bidders, all bidders that we've dealt with before. In fact, one of them is across the street, obviously. And the company that got it was Dave Steel out of Asheville, oddly enough. So they beat out South Carolina, and I think Winston-Salem were the other steel packages that came in. And we are holding with GMP 1 and GMP 1.5. We are right at what our SD cost estimate was for those 2 packages. So we still have GMP 2, which is the bulk of the divisions, or everything else, all the building.
Kyle, is the escalation allowance the same thing as contingency?
To a certain degree. If you don't use it, you get it back, but they're pretty close on that escalation amount, yeah.
That's over and above the identified
It's
amount.
included in that.
Those are built in.
Yes, that is
Correct.
correct.
Yes.
Yep. That escalation will be a lot larger when it comes to the actual GMP too. It's so low because it's just one division right now for the steel.
Okay, any other questions on this item? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Okay, next is 4.11, request from Pedcore Investments LLC, and that will be, we're glad to have Susie Morris with us, assisted by Rich and guest.
Good evening. This is a request from Pedcore Investments LLC for use of a right-of-way that is a private right-of-way that the county currently uses for EMS Station 2. Ms. Strickland is here to answer any questions that you may have. She represents Pedcore, and she is the engineer that is assigned to the project. So essentially what they are asking for is, in 2017, an agreement was done with the county that included this property. You'll see there is a right-of-way in the front of this house that then comes to the 60-foot private right-of-way. This area is the area for the county EMS 2, and that currently houses EMS staff and their vehicles, and Squad 410 and their support vehicles. Eventually, the back part of that property will be developed for an independent station for 410 for staffing and vehicles and everything that needs to be there. So this right-of-way,
Susie,
Here.
not to interrupt, where is Station 2?
off of Highway 49,
Across the street from Central Cabarrus.
yes.
Okay.
So, this is the church, if you're familiar, sorry, I can't, with the property, and the parking lot is here, and then this is the EMS station. So it actually looks like, it looks more like a driveway than a street. So what Pedcore is asking for, they would like to explore developing this property as apartments. And based on the number of apartments that they're proposing, Concord has asked for remote access. What that means is they have to have a separate access way where it is only emergency access. So that is what they are proposing. They will have to connect the project from here to here with this right-of-way. And then it would connect to the 60-foot right-of-way that the county has an interest in.
There's nothing showing up. Your pointer's not working.
It's really, I can see it spot on.
We can't see it.
Yeah, if you're looking right on,
If
you
you're-
see it.
Yeah, see it right here? See?
No,
Here it,
Wow, I don't
see it?
we can't see it at all.
I can see clear as day.
Okay, so. So this property,
We can't see it. Yeah, yeah. You're gonna have to describe it.
okay, the
probably.
property in the back where the hand is.
Yeah.
Thank you, is the property where they would like to develop the apartment complex. So here. Yes, and then there is a 45-foot right-of-way that is documented but does not show up in GIS currently, that connects to the 60-foot right-of-way to the south, that comes out to Highway 49. Yes.
As well, the one that's not documented is on the rear of lot 3.
Okay. Let me switch.
Yes, we need to, hold on one sec. Guys, can you hear that in the back room if she stands there without a microphone?
Just to get oriented.
Go ahead, go ahead.
So, this is the property where the agreement is in place for. It
That's what I was talking about. So, and it's on the house side of the property line or the lot 3 side over your hand?
It is on the house side.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
there is essentially a gap that exists between this property and the 60-foot right-of-way. They are trying to bridge that gap with the 45-foot right-of-way. So this would be remote access only and would then come down to the 60-foot right-of-way. So what they are asking for is that would be on the apartment complex property, it would be gated access only. There would be a Knox box installed, so what that means is only fire department has access, and it would only be used for emergency services, strictly the fire department, and only the fire department that responds has the key. So it is very restricted access. What PEDCor is asking is that the commissioners consider allowing the access. So in 2017, the rear property owner wanted to create that lot with the little house on it. So when they wanted to do that, the county entered into an agreement with that property owner that said if any of the status of that property changed, the county had to give them permission, because the county has a vested interest in that 60-foot right-of-way because it's emergency services. So that is why PEDCor has to make this request. Ms. Strickland is here to answer any questions you may have about the project. There was a diagram in your information that kind of showed how that would happen, and they are proposing to come across the piece with the house to connect those two. But again, it's only emergency services access. And you'll see that in the memo, we did talk with EMS, our EM director, and then also our EMS director, and they both were okay with that access as long as it is on the property where the apartments are. It is only used for emergency access, and the Knox box is installed to restrict that access. So I will let Rich take it from here as far as the agreement, and then again, if you have any questions, Ms. Strickland is here to answer.
Not to beat a dead horse, but before we do that, I'm looking at the color document that you gave us.
Okay, the pink would be.
Yeah, the pink I got.
The
but-
pink, and then the yellow.
So you ride up orange and then you swerve over to yellow to
Yes.
get to the back left of pink.
Yes, and in the corner where the pink and the yellow are is where they are proposing the gate. So it would in no way impact the 60-foot access. It would be at the end of that
Okay.
45-foot.
That's what, I just wanted to make sure I was following that.
Yes.
Since, okay, we couldn't see I thought it was my eyes. And you were pointing, I thought, golly, I can't see that at all. So anyway.
I apologize.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, my part in this, Commissioners, is that I drafted that agreement back in 2017. And it was drafted specifically to make sure that when that property in the back there developed, that it wouldn't be able to have access to the county's right-of-way. And that they'd have to come to you all to get permission, because we didn't want to have too much traffic coming down that, because it is for emergency use primarily. So, it was drafted that way specifically to make sure that when this happened now, which it now is, that you'd be able to control that. And as Susie said, she checked with Jimmy Lance and with Steve Langer to make sure they were okay with it, because they're familiar with how much traffic comes through there. And since it is restricted in the amount that's going to come from this development in the back, they said that they didn't see it being a problem, so.
Right, so Lauren has allowed me her computer. So this is the proposed apartment complex. This is the gap that they need to take care of. And then this is the 60-foot private access that shows up like a little street, but it's private.
Point out where the EMS station is and the emergency management garage is. there.
EMS is here.
Just to orient everybody.
So essentially, they come out to the 65-foot right-of-way to get to 49. And the same thing with Squad 410. And eventually, Squad 410 would have a building somewhere here to the rear of the property. So the concern, was that, that access from here towards 29, that remain unrestricted by any type of gate or, additional driveways or anything like that. So the gate would be placed here at the corner. It would be on PEDCOR's property, and again, it would only be used for fire access. And I don't know if you have anything you want to add?
No, I mean, that requirement comes from the fire code, so it's not like we're wanting it specifically. That's the state fire code that requires if you have more than 200 units, you have to have a secondary access. And there's a geometric equation, is the best way to put it, where that second access can be. And since we have a limited access highway front right now, our only access to that property is Zion Church Road. So those two, we have two access points off of Zion Church Road, but they're too close together to be considered the separate access points you need for emergencies only. So that's why we were able to, that's why we're looking to have just the emergency access point there, just to basically meet the state fire code and have that access for the fire department. It obviously works out in everyone's best interest to have it like that, so it's, something happens to the back of the complex, but.
So you can see.
And that's a very rough site plan still, so we
Yeah.
would obviously have to rework that a little bit to make sure we have that access.
Is this a LIHTC project?
It is.
I thought so.
The agenda item doesn't reflect it, but we'll probably need to have an agreement, since this is a little bit complicated, as you can see. So we'll probably want to put it in writing like we did the one back in 2017. So we'd want to have your approval for us to enter into that.
Questions on this item? Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, we move now to item 4.12 from Planning and Development, Budget Amendment for Blue Cross Blue Shield Grant, and we're happy to have Kelly Sifford with us.
Thank you. So back in February, when I came to you to talk to you about all the community development programs, and I stated that at that time that if Blue Cross Blue Shield came through with any more money, I was going ahead and getting blanket permission to go after that. There is no match with this. They did call and say they had another $10,000, and we said, yes, we'd love to have it. So this is just the budget amendment to place that revenue and that expenditure so we can get to work. It does allow us to do some health and safety repairs on low to moderate income families.
I'd say that'd be another no-brainer. Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we move now to item 4.13, Award of Electronics Detection K-9 from the Sheriff's Office.
Yes, I come before you tonight seeking approval to accept an award of an electronic K-9, detection K-9. To give you a little background, as you know, there's rarely a crime committed this day and time that does not involve some type of electronic device, be it a laptop, computer, a telephone, or whatever the case may be. In the K-9 world, in the law enforcement K-9 world, dogs are currently being trained, have been trained, and been utilized successfully to search for electronic devices, even down to a small SD card or thumb drive. And it's based on the odor emitted by certain things that are used in the manufacturing process of those chips. Dogs can be trained to utilize that. So where this is useful is especially child exploitation cases, be it child pornography, internet crimes against children, other investigations to include fraud, where someone may want to hide or secrete a device so that we don't find it. The other utilization of this dog is that if you have indications that a cell phone has been smuggled into a detention environment, this dog can be utilized in order to find that phone within the detention environment as well as opposed to just a manual search where you may not be able to find it. Jordan Detection K-9 is a company out of Indiana. They train the dogs for several nonprofit organizations that support law enforcement. And so they wish to award us electronic detection K-9. We would be, as I understand it, only the third county in the state to have one. Pitt County Sheriff's Office currently has one and has been getting a lot of utilization out of it. There is no budget amendment for it. The K-9 itself is provided, as well as the training for the handler, which we've already selected a handler. I believe his resume is included in this packet. Travis Coley, who is one of our Internet Crimes Against Children investigators. There is a 5-year commitment on the part of that handler. Basically, the nonprofit wants to make sure the dog's going to be utilized for 5 years. If for some reason we make a decision not to do it, then what it does is place us responsible for the cost of the dog and training. So there is an obligation if we fail on our end. However, we've talked about this, committed to this. We're confident that in our current budget, we can handle the maintenance of the K-9 out of currently budgeted funds, as to include the vehicle and those types of things, so that we could do that. So that is the ask that I come before you today, is to accept the award. We've been given preliminary notification that if we complete this process, that we'll receive the K-9. So I think it would be of great advantage investigatively in recovering evidence in all types of crimes.
Questions on this item, commissioners?
No question, but a quick comment of 1,000% support as someone who owns and lives, well, I don't technically own it, who lives with a retired service dog. And I saw firsthand the training process that she went through. And will take every opportunity I can to tout the trainers and the handlers and the programs for all kinds of service dogs out there, because I've seen it up close and personal and firsthand. So the fact that we, again, Cabarrus County, second time tonight, lead the state or very close, like the drone situation of doing things for the betterment of the people that live here. I mean, I'm thrilled to hear that we have been invited to participate and that you guys have identified somebody to be the dog's handler. And I mean, I just think that's tremendous. So to all the people out there that are doing this type of work, it is incredible what these dogs can do. So really, just, I won't bore you, but when we got home with our dog that my wife used in Cabarrus County schools, she could take my socks off. So one of her commands would be if I didn't have my shoes on, she could take my socks off, close the pantry door, turn lights on. I mean, it's unbelievable what these dogs can do. So I know it'll be a tremendous asset for you and your staff. So I'm thrilled to death to hear that.
Thank you.
Sheriff, with the addition of this K-9, how many will that give to Sheriff's Office K-9s?
8. We've, and I say that because we've had some transition with retirement of dogs. So sometimes replacing that K-9 lags behind. That's why I wanted to check with the chief, who always keeps me straight on the numbers, to make sure that I don't speak. But I just wanted to bring this before you because there is an obligation if we fail to do our job. I don't think there'll be any problem with that. I think we'll utilize the dog greatly. To give you an idea of the value, it's about $12,000, the cost of the dog and the training that the handler will receive, and which we're getting at no match, no cost.
Great. I would say that falls in that same no-brainer category that we talked about earlier. But I must say that as I read this, I didn't probably read it carefully enough, and I saw electronic K-9, and then we were talking about the drones. I was already thinking about the Jetsons. So
We're not
So I was
quite there.
visualizing a robotic dog there for a minute.
Yeah, we're not quite there, but I'm sure it's coming. If we live long enough, we'll see
Right.
it. So,
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're proud to, they were wise in their selection.
well, we've got a lot of, I have to brag on our investigators and just the advancements we've made in technology and digital evidence is incredible. We're doing some wonderful things. One of our investigators was named one of the top 50 digital forensic investigators in the country. And so, I mean, that speaks highly of him and the training he's receiving through the U.S. Secret Service, the FBI. I'm a big believer in technology when it comes to crime fighting, and our folks are doing an outstanding job when it comes to that.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
We all benefit from that. Okay, we move now to the approval of our regular meeting agenda. We've already discussed one item, which is the addition of a public hearing on the ordinance that we discussed earlier.
G1
G1,
turns into a public hearing.
yeah, under new business. So we could just add a public hearing to that, since we have a number of other public hearings in new business.
And then that F3, didn't we say we would move that to new business as well? The fiscal recovery fund spending plan, because we don't have that yet.
Yes, so that would move to G6.
Sounds good. That's all I saw.
Okay, any other corrections or additions that anyone sees? Okay, then.
I'll move for approval. with
All right.
Changes mentioned.
We have a motion to approve the regular meeting agenda with those corrections, and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That motion passes. We do have need of a closed session tonight. So at this time, I would entertain a motion to go into closed session to discuss matters related to pending litigation and acquisition of real property as authorized by North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11 A3 and 5. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes. We are now in closed session. Want to thank everyone that joined us tonight. Also, immediately following this meeting will be the first airing of the newest episode of Out and About with Commissioner Strang. She had an interview with Interim Superintendent Brian Schultz from Cabarrus County Schools, and we'll also hear from new Superintendent of Kannapolis City Schools, Kevin Gary. And so we hope all of you will stay tuned and watch that. Thank you.